the SEC is brought to you by Miller Eye Care and Optical, 694-2622.
Time to learn about the opponent for Tennessee on Saturday, the Mississippi State Bulldogs. We bring in friend of the show from the Jackson Clarion-Ledger, Brandon Marcello. The Marcello on Twitter joins us here on the new Sentinel Sports page. Hey, Brandon, Vincent, Jesse, how are you?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
We're good. So, Brandon, you're excited about as a beat writer. You're super stoked about an 8 p.m. Central Time start for Saturday, right?
Oh, man. The deadline monkey is going to be jumping on my back Saturday night. There's no doubt about that.
All right. Well, let's talk about Mississippi State. A lot of people have scoffed at the undefeated record and the ranking because of the schedule. What do you feel like is legit, and what is still yet to be determined about this Mississippi State team?
You know, I think this game this Saturday against Tennessee, I think would legitimize that record. I think taking down Tennessee, a team that's got an explosive offense and has proven, obviously, that it can contend with the big boys in the SEC, that knocking off Tennessee would help legitimize that, and I think people would go, okay, this Mississippi State team is a top 18, top 15 team. Now, with that said, having watched this team up close, I think they're a top 20 team because when they have to make big plays, they do it, and a lot of that has to do with Tyler Russell. Mississippi State hasn't seen a quarterback like him in decades. This guy is clutch. He's able to make the big throws when he needs them. When it's almost like if you go up to Tyler Russell and say, hey, listen, we do need a touchdown this drive. This drive absolutely need a touchdown. He's able to deliver. You know, he did it at Troy. He did it in a sense at Kentucky when Kentucky was trying to get back in the game, and he went in and threw this touchdown pass to Chad Bumpus where he just threw it on a needle and threw it on a rope and just split two defenders and somehow got the ball in there. And that's what he does. He's a kind of a gunslinger, and for that very reason, along with State's defense, which I think maybe the numbers don't really show it, but it is really, really good, especially that secondary. I think this team is a legitimate top 20 team.
Just address that secondary. They're getting a lot of publicity so far earlier in the week up here with Jonathan Banks and Darius Slay combining for 7 interceptions so far.
Yeah, and you know, I guess Kentucky was the first game that that Mississippi State didn't record an interception. So maybe they're due again. But yeah, those guys, Darius Slay and Jonathan Banks, have been absolutely phenomenal. You went into the season knowing Banks was really good. But the guy that emerged was Darius Slay. And last spring, Darius Slay transferred in from junior college, played last year, only had one pick, kind of a reserve guy. But in the spring, they played him more at cornerback. He got more shots. And there was one scrimmage I remember where he picked off 3 passes in a short scrimmage, and there should have been 5. He dropped two others. The guy was phenomenal. And that kind of set in motion a change. They moved Corey Broomfield, a 3-year starter from cornerback in that area, to safety, to strong safety, to make room for Darius Slay. And he hasn't disappointed with 4 interceptions and at one point was leading the nation. That group is probably the best duo of cornerbacks in the SEC, if not the nation. And I think that maybe the matchup of the week, no matter any game in the nation, might be Tennessee's receivers against Mississippi State's cornerbacks.
We're visiting with Brandon Marcello from the Jackson Clarion-Ledger, covers the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Brandon, one of the assistants for Mississippi State, I saw Melvin Smith said, quote, if you order wide receivers out of a magazine, that's what you get. Talking about Tennessee's wide receivers, what's sort of been the feedback about Tennessee and the receivers this week from Mississippi State?
Well, you know how coaches, they'll go up and they'll just start, calling players by numbers from opposing teams.
Mm-hmm.
That's not happening this week. They know all the receivers' names of Tennessee. These guys have been looking at them for a while. They know who these guys are. Justin Hunter, obviously, and Patterson having great years. These are guys that kind of scares Mississippi State. And Melvin Smith was exactly right. And Chris Wilson, the defensive coordinator, said yesterday, he goes, you're going to see matchups Saturday night with the receivers and quarterbacks. It's going to be pro football players against pro football players. You might as well be watching an NFL team out there when those 4 or 5 players are going up against each other Saturday night. That's a primary concern for them, and not only because of their talent, but Mississippi State has struggled against some passing teams. They struggled against Troy. They struggled in a sense against South Alabama, but those were spread offenses. They're trying to get the ball out in a hurry and do a lot of screens. It's very interesting to see how they struggle against them. But Mississippi State plans to go into this game and try to confuse Tyler Bray. They're going to give him multiple looks, and I would suspect that Mississippi State might show some things defensively that they have not shown all season.
Brandon, Vince mentioned the 5-0 start just a few minutes ago. What does the fan base think of this on the whole? Are they kind of tempering their excitement a little bit given the opponents coming up?
I think some fans are tempering their excitement a little bit just because of the past. They've seen, state teams kind of start off on a roll a little bit and then have a disappointing game. And to an extent, it even happened last season. They got up in the top 20 early in the season, then lost on the road at Auburn. Some of them are just kind of waiting to stumble because, as you said, they haven't played really tough teams yet. Most of the teams they're playing, in fact, I think all the teams they're playing, have losing records, save for maybe Troy. And this is a game that I think, for a lot of these fans, they consider to be the game of the year so far, just because it can almost, I think this game could set in motion what the rest of the season is going to be like for the Bulldogs, because if you lose, the disappointment sets in, and then you have to play a Middle Tennessee team the next week that went into Georgia Tech and beat them by 21 points, so that's always scary. And then obviously after that game, State's got to play Alabama and LSU and Texas A&M in a row. So I think the fan base is they're excited, but they're a little bit cautious, especially going into this week.
Joined by Brandon Marcello from the Jackson Clarion-Ledger, B. Marcello on Twitter here on the New Sentinel Sports page, learning about Mississippi State. Let's talk about the wide receivers at Mississippi State. Chad Bumpus obviously had a huge week last week, but they seem to have had the dropsies at times. How big of a concern is that, or are they past some of those drops we've seen?
Yeah, you're right. In the Troy game a few weeks back, they had 7 drop passes, and still Tyler Russell put up a lot of yards, and so did Chad Bumpus, who I think had 180 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. That is a concern. And it gets in the Kentucky game, Chris Smith, who's kind of Mississippi State's second or third leading receiver, he had a catch and fumbled the ball. He's done that twice this season and lost a fumble. It's interesting. State's only turned the ball over 3 times this year, one on an interception by Tyler Russell and the other 2 on fumbles by Chris Smith, the receiver. But you're exactly right. You can't drop passes, and State's receivers have done that from time to time. I think the big storyline for them when it comes to the passing game is that, everybody knows they're going to go to Chad Bumpus, but, who else can they get involved in the passing game that can be a legit guy who can stretch the field and also hold on to the football? I think State's still trying to find that. Of course, they've got Arcito Clark and Chris Smith who can have the opportunity to do that, but I think they're still working to get some more guys involved in the passing game.
One of the things that I've been impressed with by Mississippi State when I have watched them, now I haven't watched all 5 of their games, but when I do catch them from time to time, they don't seem to be penalized as much. I know you mentioned they don't have many turnovers, but just a few penalties a game. I think I look at their cumulative stats here, just 24 on the season through 5 games, and I think they only had 2 last week.
Yeah, only 2 penalties last week for 9 yards on the road, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. They're pretty disciplined, and when they do have mistakes, it's not usually personal fouls. It's usually motion penalties and things like that, and false starts. So they're a pretty disciplined football team, which is good for a team that likes to run the football and try to grind out some opponents late in the game.
Brandon, there's a perception here from Tennessee fans that Tennessee has a clear athlete and talent advantage over Mississippi State. Talk about some of the guys that were highly rated, that coming out of high school that were 4 or 5 star prospects on that roster. And then also guys that are NFL prospects, like you mentioned, the corners in that Mississippi State secondary. Talk about some of those guys, just so I think fans can hear that there is some talent on that Mississippi State team.
There's not a lot of 5-star guys, but there's a lot of 4-star guys.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler Russell was a 4-star guy out of high school. Was getting looked at by Alabama and South Carolina out of high school. They actually were going after him pretty hard. Chad Bumpus was another highly recruited guy, and he's proving it this year as a senior at receiver. On the defensive front, guys like Josh Boyd, highly recruited. Denico Autry, a defensive end who transferred in from a junior college this past year. He was the number 2 JUCO player in the nation last year. So they've got some talent. And then you look at the guys that are NFL possibilities. Jonathan Banks, who a lot of people think is going to be a first-rounder in the NFL draft in April. I think he was like a 2-star guy. I might be mistaken there, but he was not highly recruited. He was a local kid from Maben, Mississippi. Was not recruited by a lot of people, but look at him now. He's an amazing talent. Josh Boyd, as I mentioned earlier, he's also an NFL-type talent at defensive tackle. He'll be playing somewhere here in the next year or two. And then, other than that, you kind of look around. There's not a lot of, high-profile guys that will be in the first 2 or 3 rounds of the NFL draft, but they've got some talent. And I think more importantly for them is that these guys that are NFL-worthy or were highly recruited, those guys are juniors and seniors now, so they've got a lot of experience, and that's kind of what's helping them late in these games.
I don't know how many stars this guy had, but one of my favorite names in all of SEC play, Fernando Bohanna. Please tell me he's like the coolest guy on that team.
He's got a great name. It's interesting. He's a sophomore, and he was battling for the starting spot with Benardrick McKinney at middle linebacker, and McKinney kind of overtook him. In fact, this past week he got co-freshman of the week after a big performance in Kentucky. Benardrick McKinney, middle linebacker, leads the team with tackles at 36, actually bypassed Cam Lawrence, the SEC's leading returning tackler from last season, who plays on the outside for Mississippi State. They've got some talent at the linebacker spot. Not a lot of people talk about him, but, Cam Lawrence, the outside linebacker, the senior, he does a good job of reading offenses and getting them all set up to be in position to make plays. I think last year he was really the story of that defense because there would be times where you'd see him point out where a play was going on film, and that was exactly where it was going.
Visiting with Brandon Marcello from the Jackson Clarion-Ledger as we scout Mississippi State for the Tennessee game this Saturday night. Couple things. I got to let you talk about Ladarius Perkins, terrific running back, and talk about what he and the rest of those backs mean to that offense.
Perkins, everybody was questioning, could he be an every down back? Because he was a guy who was always a speed rusher, a guy who could do things off the edge. And he's proven to be an every down back. He's had 2 games of 20-plus carries, I believe. One of them was this past game in Kentucky where he rushed for 100-plus yards, 110 yards. And then at Troy when they needed him, and he rushed for 100-plus yards. He can be a bruiser if you need him, but he's so fast that once he gets past the defensive line, he's got a chance to pick up 20 or 30 yards because he can outrun any linebacker in the SEC and maybe any cornerback in the SEC once he gets past that defensive line. Very impressive player, a guy that really fits well in this offense with what they try to do, spreading people out. Very good on zone reads and everything. Very impressive player. He was explosive his first 2 years, but now he's proving that he can run between the tackles and be able to outrun people once he gets past that line.
Brandon, I want to switch gears here real quick. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. College basketball season just a month away. Local product from Knoxville, Jalen Steele, looks to be one of the lead guys, if not the lead guy for Mississippi State's basketball team this year. What are you kind of getting? What kind of sense are you getting from that program, and what kind of role he'll have?
Yeah, he will be the lead guy. He's a leading returning scorer with 8+ points a game. That roster's decimated. It's a lot of newcomers got to fill roles. Rick Ray has had to boot a couple of guys off the team in the past month or so. Everybody's going to turn to Jalen Steele for the leadership this year and also the scoring until everybody else, all these freshmen and JUCO guys, get some experience underneath them. But Steele is really, he wasn't really a vocal guy last year. You saw in some games last year where he would go on a tear. He had 3 or 4 straight shots, and he would try to amp everybody up by doing that. But this year, more importantly, he's got to keep doing that, but he's also got to be more of a vocal leader in that locker room because there's not a lot of experience on this team, and they're going to go through a lot of growing pains this season.
Brandon, last couple things on the football team. How much do you think, you mentioned maybe defensively, they might do some things that they hadn't done before in terms of the Mississippi State secondary against Tennessee to show Tyler Bray some different looks. What about offensively? I kind of get the sneaking suspicion that we'll see some things from Dan Mullen we hadn't seen. Being around him, how much do you think maybe they've been holding some things specifically for Tennessee to try to keep them off balance and take advantage of some of the big plays they've given up?
Well, I don't know if they're keeping anything from them, but the thing that's been hurting them, if anything, is that they've gone away from the tight end. The first two games, Marcus Green had 3 touchdown catches for 85 and a total of 85 yards the first 3 games. The first 2 games. In the last 3 games, all the tight ends have combined for only 1 catch for 2 yards, and that came against Kentucky. And State this week is getting back Malcolm Johnson, their top tight end from last season, a youngster who is a mismatch against a lot of linebackers. And they were expecting to be the starter this year and to have a big season, maybe be a 20, 30-catch type guy. He's expected to come back this week. Hasn't played all season because of a pectoral injury. And I think adding into the lineup allows them to do some different things, not only in the passing game, but in some 2 tight end sets that we haven't seen this season. And that's something Tennessee will probably have to prepare for or adjust for on the fly when they come to Starkville Saturday night.
And hit on the different elements of special teams for Mississippi State.
Well, Baker Swedenberg has been a really good punter for them, pinning a lot of teams inside the 20-yard line. And Devin Bell, their field goal kicker, is a true freshman. He started 0 for 3, but he's hit his last 6 field goals and done so convincingly, hit some 40-yarders as well. He's really coming on of late. And kick returns have not been great, but they can break a few. Jamion Lewis has broken a couple of 45-yard returns. And their punt and kick coverage has really been pretty good, in my opinion.
Brandon, really appreciate it. Great work from Brandon Marcello. You can track his work, B. Marcello on Twitter and at the Jackson Clarion-Ledger this week to get more on Mississippi State. Really appreciate you, Brandon. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, guys.